Hey everyone, welcome back to All Aboard with Rob Belliveau. I'm Rob Belliveau, the host, and today I am super excited for this guest. Been working and hoping to gain the confidence and trust to have her on this podcast for several months now. Dr. Emma Zone from D2L. Hey Emma,
Hi, how are you? Good to be here. Finally, right?
finally, right?
Yeah.
Emma, Senior Director of Academic Affairs at D2L. I feel like that even that title, there might be a lot of folks who listen to our podcast, particularly from corporate and kind of non-education backgrounds, might be wondering what that is. So why don't you let us know what is your role and what do you do at D2L?
Sure. Yeah. So let's start with where I came from, which is
All right.
education, right?
Yes.
So I started my career actually as a K-12 educator, high school English teacher, but moved into university teaching as well as community college teaching. And I think the term academic affairs is pretty common for
Hmm.
those educational settings. But as you've just pointed out, the differentiation at an actual company or organization that maybe isn't an institution of
Yeah.
education is different, right?
Right. Yeah.
So it's unique for sure. So I have the pleasure of really helping to oversee all of our thought leadership strategy, research work that we do when it comes to the intersection of teaching and learning and what we're doing within Brightspace, and really just supporting our current customers and even just people in the field who are interested in thinking through not just what is the solution around technology, but really
Mhm.
how does it impact the whole ecosystem within academics and beyond. So whether that's faculty,
Yeah.
students, all of the myriad services that come with education. So it's definitely a fun, exciting role, and it's one that gives me something different to do every day, which I really like.
Yeah. Well, and as if anyone out there has been a repeat listener knows that a lot of our guests on this podcast, the thread that ties us all is Brightspace by D2L, which is the learning management system Neon Train uses, and other major academic and large corporations across the world use it. um, when you explain what you're doing, it's actually a little less about the technical platform and really almost everything out around it, isn't it?
Yeah, a lot of it is really thinking through not only like the scholarship of teaching and learning and how we think
Mhm.
about how we what we are doing and how what we are doing has impact, but also just processes around organizational development, change management, culture is a big part of
Mhm.
it, right?
Mhm.
Because, like you've said, I mean, the technology is one piece of that overarching, change, I guess, initiative that many institutions
Right.
and organizations are going through. And
Right.
so in my role, I sort of get to come in and help provide a strategic lens
Mhm.
from somebody who has actually sat on that side of the desk as an academic administrator. So I'm a former vice provost, I've been a faculty my whole career. So sort of thinking through the nuances of the culture of technology in some
Yeah.
ways.
I I was thinking about this before, and I was thinking about parallels because I often like to draw parallels between higher education and corporate education because while many folks think they're very different and they're these two completely siloed places, they're actually really not.
Mm,
And I think about your role much like a chief learning officer in
mhm.
an organization, that you're the architect overseeing the learning development using potentially one or many platforms, working with the people and culture side of how the organizational change is happening and what the downstream effect is. It really has a very big parallel to kind of chief learning officer type roles in organizations. And hadn't really thought of that until actually getting ready for this. So it's kind of neat to find that equation, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I think also we're talking about learners, right? And those learners look different depending on the organization or as you've just said, whether it's
Mhm.
um, an institution or whether it's a K-12 school district
Right.
or an association, right? At the end of the day, we're talking about learners and learning. And we do have those common threads, even if there may be different challenges or different ways to think about going about certain things.
Mhm.
And I think
Mhm.
that's the other sort of key part of what we do in academic affairs is who is the learner
Right.
and how are we utilizing evidence-based practice and what we know about good teaching and learning science and organizational development and perceived organizational support to meet the needs of those learners, whether
Of
that's
those
the
learners,
first
yeah.
grader or,
Mhm.
like you're saying, somebody in the corporate setting.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so when you talk about, I'm really curious, and I think our listeners would be a little curious about this idea of research. And I think, of course, when you think of higher education, you definitely think of research. Universities and colleges are always advancing both the teaching and learning of their learners, but also the academic advancement of programs and the science of learning or the science of whatever the subject matter kind of area is. Can you give us a bit
Mhm.
of an example of some of the research that you're working on through the lens of D2L and
Sure.
how that is having potentially immediate or future benefits to some of the folks that are using the platform?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's something we're really proud of in academic affairs, because it's been a big commitment. That started really when Dr. Christy Ford came to D2L, and we've
Hmm.
continued to expand the work.
Yep.
And so when we talk about research, we are looking at efficacy research and SOTL research specific to, again, that intersection of
Hmm.
technology with teaching and learning. But I think what's interesting is our approach at D2L is we know that there is other research happening through other departments at our organization and beyond,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
we really want to give a space to faculty and instructional designers, others who are interested in engaging in research who may not always have the vehicle to do that, right?
Right.
It's sometimes not all the voices are invited to the table in some
Hmm.
cases. And so our goal is really to provide some pathways around how we look at potential or certain features and functions and what
Okay.
that means for the learner, right? So
Yeah.
I just saw you at Fusion a couple weeks ago,
Yep.
and we had our very first research track at Fusion. Great example, right? So we had people presenting on utilizing certain tools within the system. Before I
Hmm.
came to E2L, we had a study published on using video note and what
Hmm.
that means for feedback. So it
Yep.
can be very granular. It can be a little bit larger. It can relate to instructional design, but ultimately the goal is to provide a space and a vehicle to, again, encourage voices. And
Hmm.
like you mentioned, colleges, maybe folks at colleges are who aren't necessarily as research oriented, but are interested in understanding some of these
Or
research
there's
questions.
untapped value there
Yes,
that just because the structure doesn't support research in those institutions doesn't mean there can't be value taken from groups like yours to help bring that to the
yes,
surface.
yeah. It's funny because I just had a conversation with somebody earlier this week who's a faculty of medicine using
Mhm.
Brightspace, but teaches, microbiology, immunology, all things that as an English faculty by trade are totally out of my wheelhouse.
Yep.
But this particular professor has recently become very interested in online learning and
Yep.
humanizing online learning, right? So
Mhm.
beyond the scope of maybe her immediate subject area, but really understanding, okay, but I can reach learners in a different way, and is now interested in engaging some subtle
Yeah,
research around that. So it's really cool just
yeah,
kind of helping people think through different ways to think about research, but also building capacity, like you said, if it's not in their
right.
wheelhouse or maybe not something supported through their
Yeah,
particular institution.
yeah.
We have a vehicle to do that, which is really cool.
Yeah, and there's a lot of parallels to, how Neon Train works with our learning providers of small, medium-sized institutions that
Yes.
some have Brightspace knowledge, some don't. And it's interesting you bring up video no, because I am a huge proponent of video feedback, personalized feedback, helps build trust between the educator and the learner, engagement, and, just makes it more humanized, as you were
Mhm.
mentioning for that medicine, professor. What's interesting is the thought of, connecting something as small as a very micro tool in Brightspace, but very powerful, back to a larger organizational objective of creating relationship type learning that builds trust and retention, and hopefully and probably scientifically by some research project,
Yep.
better outcomes, right?
Yeah, exactly, and I think it's something that's serves many different audiences in that regard. So video note is interesting because, as you said, it's a micro feature in some ways,
Mhm.
but what we're talking about is building community, and that's the case not only for student and learner engagement, but
Yeah,
also for faculty engagement, right? We often
absolutely.
forget that the instructor, the faculty member, the teacher, the educator craves that community much in the same way. And if
Mhm.
you can put a voice, and of course it's all accessible, it's all makes it
Yeah,
really easy. So
yeah,
it's not
yeah,
like I can remember way back when we'd have to like record things, upload it, do the captioning. It took forever and it was
yeah.
almost it just was cumbersome. So it's nice to
And
be able
people
to
avoided it. They didn't do it.
no,
Yeah, they didn't do it.
100%.
No.
Why
Yeah,
would you?
no.
Why would you add
Yeah,
that many steps to the
yeah,
process, right?
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, that's a really good example of one feature. But then we also look a little bit more broadly as well
Mhm.
at things like instructional design and some of those pieces.
Right.
Of course, AI. So we have some exciting
Mm.
things coming down the pipeline with thinking through what are the next phases of some of our research projects. All of that hopefully will be up on our teaching and learning studio here in the near term. We're trying to translate it from where it lives in these open access peer reviewed journals to the teaching and learning studio that we
Teaching and
have at
learning.
D2L. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah. We're
awesome.
psyched about that.
There was a little I love doing these podcasts because even though I've talked before, and, obviously today is not scripted at all. Things
Right.
always come up, and then we go down a little rabbit hole, and it's always
Great.
been a little fun. And again, I like forming parallels between higher education and corporate education because I believe both can learn from each other in so many
Hmm.
different in interesting ways. You talked about faculty wanting to have that community. So we talk about the learner and creating the
Hmm.
learner environment, the classroom environment. I think we all have a pretty good handle on a lot of that. But I've noticed a trend in my last few years around the D12 Brightspace kind of community and higher education that universities and colleges are turning more to Brightspace for faculty training that
Hmm.
typically wasn't a focus of
Yes.
using this beautiful tool that they have in their back pocket. It was all just very student and learner centric. Have you been seeing that same shift in your talks and meetings with different institutions?
Absolutely. And that's the case not only at the university level, but also within K-12 settings, right? How are we
Right.
thinking about meaningful professional learning utilizing the tools at hand, in this case, Brightspace? And I think
Hmm.
there's definitely an interest because we also know that upskilling is necessary in
100%.
all professions, but
Yeah.
it's absolutely a big part of it. And going back to the parallels that you were talking about, when we're talking about educators, regardless of their affiliation,
Hmm.
those are adult learners.
Right.
And
Right.
how we have been addressing adult learning from a professional learning standpoint, oftentimes in school settings, is not very effective.
Correct.
we're in the midst of back to school here. I live in Texas. So one of my good friends actually was telling me about the training she was at yesterday. It's a one and done thing,
Yeah.
valuable. She got some nuggets, but it's not necessarily something that actually like integrates into the fabric of her practice throughout the
Right.
week. Whereas when you offer something through Brightspace and it allows the learner to engage when it's meaningful to them,
Yeah.
we know that the outcomes will be better. I mean,
Right.
that's just good adult learning anyway,
Well,
right? Yeah.
yeah, it's learning. We talk about Fusion, which is the users annual users conference for D12. We're going to talk about that in a minute. We're going to come back to that. I've parked that off to the side. But I did a session on the use of Brightspace for coaching, and I had several folks from higher education come to that session, and we talked about the use case of having a year long course based on the school year, of
Mhm.
having maybe senior professors or instructors mentor newer instructors into the world, but have a course open for the year. Heavy use of video note, which is funny that we talk about it, and use Brightspace as a coaching and mentoring vehicle rather than just a one and done. Take the course, you got the learning, you got the grade, and you're off, you're done. Use it for that community, that real relationship building that can help enhance teacher comfort, which
Right.
then enhances the outcomes. So it's funny. We just had that conversation at Fusion.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, I mean, there is something to that because we also know that you can give faculty and others as many research articles about what is good teaching, what is evidence based practice.
Mhm.
They're far less likely to follow those than they are to listen to a peer,
Right.
or some other, like you described, a mentor or a coach.
Mhm.
And so I think that's important. We're also finding uses for those types of communities of practice within D2L, within some
Right.
of our employee resource groups. So I'm a part of our
Mhm.
Women in Action mentorship where you come
Yep.
in for a emerging leaders and others and at all different stages, women who are kind of looking for that um, mentorship piece,
Mhm.
exactly what you're describing. There's content, yes, but then there's an opportunity to
For
engage.
engagement.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Talk about micro tools, when I did this presentation, I explained the functionality of Brightspace and how you can make individual discussion boards for
Well,
everyone in your class list, and a few people didn't know that that existed,
mm,
and really good for journaling or reflection type exercising of, "Yeah, I tried this in my class today, it didn't work," and then the instructor can come in and look at that and provide immediate feedback for remediation or different tools and tips, and just some of the simple small tools Brightspace has can really expand that teaching and learning kind of toolbox for instructors, right?
yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And again, it's stickier, right? Versus just sit down for a workshop. And nothing against workshops or webinars. I like all of those
No,
too.
of
But
course, yeah.
but it's more of just, okay, this is actually completely relevant to my practice and my
Yes.
context.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah,
just a difference maker. And
right.
sometimes it does take just somebody else offering different uses, like the
Mhm.
multi-use of these tools to recognize, wait a minute, this
Yeah,
actually could
yeah,
fit
Yeah.
into what we need for this particular use case. So I love
Well,
that.
and I think I think the takeaway tip, and we always like to leave our listeners with some takeaways that they can like immediately take back to to their institution, to their company, to wherever they work, is when you train your folks with some level of educational standard you would hope they build and train to as well. When they see themselves in it, they're more they're more apt to replicate it and use it than
Yes,
this abstract, oh, a course could should look like this.
right.
When you're actually subject to it as a learner, you
Oh,
start
for
to
sure.
understand it, right?
Oh my gosh. When I did my doctoral program, I did it fully online and
Mhm.
I was simultaneously working in an assistant dean role. So I had this really interesting dichotomy of being a learner in the system and
Yeah.
being, you know, understanding sort of what was coming at me, what was easy in terms of navigation and
Yeah.
choice and all that. And then on the flip side, putting on the other hat and saying, okay, now as somebody who's helping to administer these programs, I think
Right.
it's highly valuable to take on a learner role in any of these different settings because it just gives you a perspective that is
Mhm.
very different.
Mhm.
And what we may assume is easy or straightforward as somebody designing learning or
Right.
facilitating it, we quickly learn, wait a minute, we thought choice would be good. There are too many choices. Like I need to be
Mhm.
able to log in and know, go here, go here, go here,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
I don't the Brightspace, folks may not like this, but I've always said the best thing about Brightspace is there's 1,000 ways to do something. The worst thing about Brightspace is there's 1,000 ways to do something. So, having folks that have walked the trail and can provide those best practices is always important.
Yes.
And I, on that note, are you seeing a shift with some of your institutions turning for, what do some of these kind of course examples or
Mhm.
exemplars or templates look like for best
Mhm.
practices? Are we seeing a
Yeah.
shift where faculty heads, deans are trying to take more ownership of some of that design? Because I know in the past, certainly there's always been, the kind of the academic freedom, which is very
Yes.
important for certain elements. How are we seeing that in system
Yeah.
design right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it really varies on the institution and institutional
Hmm.
mission, of course.
Hmm.
But there is definitely, I think, an appetite for those types of templates and or exemplars. We have a really nice connection and partnership with Quality Matters, for example. We're
Yep.
really proud
Yep.
of that work.
Yep.
And so that started as a free master class where people could sort
Hmm.
of start to learn some of those basics, and then has matured into something much more. So whether it's taking those types of industry standards and bringing those into the
In
ecosystem,
right.
or even, going back to the fusion conversation, those types
Right.
of connections. And this is also something I think academic affairs does really well. Is it probably one of the best parts of the job?
Mhm.
Is I may hear from one institution, a community college, for example, who says we're really wanting to do X with our new faculty training, and I
Right.
know that there's another institution that's doing something very similar. It's so powerful to be able to be the connector
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
communities. And Christy and
Yeah.
I talk about that often, whether it's a solution somebody's looking for, or
Mhm.
even somebody who might be going through a total transformation at their institution. And we know that there is somebody else who has just gone through that. What a gift to be able to
Yeah.
connect those folks, to
Yeah.
have that, ongoing connection and
Yeah.
mentorship, even
Yeah.
if it's outside of their state, their province,
Yeah.
their country in some
Yeah.
cases.
No, absolutely.
It can be a really great way to network. So I think that's the other thing that we see is
Yeah.
often we're hearing from our teams internally at D2L, "Hey, I was on a call with this group. Here's what came up.
Yeah.
Have any ideas of who we
Can
could."
you help? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
which is great. And that's powerful. That is very powerful.
Well, and it saves people time and ultimately money if
Yeah,
there's networks of us that are out there that can help shortcut, the discovery, the work, and back to the conversation about research, why and how organizations are making the decisions they are in the system and in their instructional design, then it provides immediate confidence and reassurance that if this is the proposed solution, do it, just do it. This is a
right.
Nike moment,
Right.
right? So
We've
yeah,
walked this road. Here's where we found
yeah,
some, potholes. We want you
yeah,
to avoid
yeah,
them.
yeah, yeah.
Might as well pass on those learnings. And I think people feel empowered when they do that, and it just helps to build the community overall.
Absolutely. Yeah, it reminds me of when folks who have listened to this know my history in the past was with Brightspace, bringing it to the city of Halifax and the Halifax Fire Department. And I remember many moons ago, over a dozen years ago, bringing that system in there and going to my first fusion and finding this community of peers and institutions and colleagues that just want to share information on how they build their courses, on how they run their stuff, how they've done organizational change. And it was a huge comfort, and it definitely expedited my implementation of Brightspace back in
For sure.
2013. So the same holds true now, and I think that's again a great little intro into D12 Fusion. So the users conference just took place, and you were there, I was there, and
It was
another
hot.
thousand odd people were there, and it was hot. We have heat here in the Maritimes and in East Coast of Canada. We have humidity because we're on the ocean.
Sure.
Well, that was heat and humidity like I've never felt, wasn't it?
That's right. Yeah, it was warm. I'm in Texas, so I'm used to the heat and humidity, but what a great event, right? I mean,
Yeah,
just a mix of people, all different backgrounds, and to your point, something for everybody. I mean, I think that's what was really neat
absolutely.
about the research track that we kept saying our inaugural research track, but it's
Mhm.
also a testament, I think, to the creativity of the folks at D2L. I mean,
Yeah.
Christy and I, you know, w as the academics kind of in terms of just we have a lot of academics on the team, right? But our academic affairs group is
Yep.
small but mighty, and
Yep.
sometimes we come to the table with these ideas and it's like, "Okay, we wanna try this." And it's like having that room to experiment, and we did that with
Mhm.
the research track, and it was well
Mhm.
received, and we're excited to build that.
Mhm.
But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Fusion had I think over 1,000, at least 1,000 folks there. Lots and lots of sessions in all different facets. I always love the cross mix of folks because like I said, I feel like all of our different kind of what we think are silos of K-12, higher ed, corporate. We're not that much different if we just put those guards down. When it comes to your takeaway from Fusion this year, what was your highlight? What did you leave with that you're like, this is why I go to Fusion, and I can't wait to go to Fusion next year, which in next year is going to be Phoenix, which another
Yeah,
hot place. Yeah,
different kind of heat, as we
yeah,
say,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think this sort of, reminds me of our conversation that we've had over these last couple of weeks that there's a lot of tension and stress in the space right now, regardless of where you live and whether you're in higher
Yep.
ed or K-12, right? And I was reminded of this yesterday. I was on a phone call or a Zoom with some folks, and it just reminds me that even when we are dealing with trying times or uncertainty, if
Hmm.
we have the more we can partner and bring together the power of community, the better
Right.
off we will be. So
Right.
my big takeaway was that, like, everybody needed that, right? We all
Yeah.
sort of need that because there are so many unknowns.
Yeah.
And I think, that's the case of regardless of role, whether you're talking about as a company that does technology or a
Hmm.
faculty member, right? So I think my biggest takeaway was that there was definitely and is continuing to be an appetite for that type of connection,
Right.
a place to have the hard conversations, but also to celebrate good work. And I think that's what makes Fusion unique is it's this really interesting celebration, not only of the latest and greatest features and functions,
Right.
ultimately, what does it need
People,
to learn
just
in the
people.
moment?
For the
Yeah.
people. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
100%. Yeah, I definitely feel the same way. I was privileged to speak 3 times at Fusion this
Yeah.
year.
Awesome.
Once on, the use of, diversity and inclusion in education and the benefits, also on the use of podcasting in education, and then also, on coaching, and, each one had different participants in my sessions, and definitely that power of community was felt, and, for both our friends, Americans in the South and us in Canada, our both of our education systems are going through some stress tests right now in kind of some similar ways, but different ways,
Mhm.
and the perseverance of the folks there still committed to the learner cause,
Right.
I think that was really inspiring for me.
Yeah. Well said. Agree 100%.
Yeah. We're actually already at time, Emma. I feel like I have 2 or 3 other things I wanna, like, roll into here about some things, but I think I'm gonna park it because I'd love to have you back on, and I think
Yeah.
our listeners would, and I think this crossover is really fun. Dr. Emma Zone, phone a friend for academic affairs in Brightspace if you need some
Find me.
assistance.
Yes.
Um, but, thanks, Emma. I really appreciate you coming out today.
Yeah, thanks. I'm so glad we can make this happen. I've been following the podcast for a while now, so happy to be on the train. So,
You're on the train, amazing, and, for those of you listening, thanks for, listening to me for another 23 minutes, this time. If you have any feedback for this show or if you'd like to get a hold of Dr. Emma Zone, I can help out with that. Email us at allaboard@neontrain.com, and, thanks for listening. Until next time.
thank you.